I'm just going to take you through as much content as I possibly can in the next like 70-ish minutes, is looks like about what we got.
Yep.
And kind of the goal, Ryan, is for tonight to be kind of this high level overview. I want to kind of talk some details, some very kind of timely, important things that we need to talk about, the opportunity to kind of get involved in this space. And then obviously we got a class coming up that's going to allow us to go deeper into these topics. And so without kind of dragging it on, why don't I go ahead and kick it off here?
Go for it. It's all you.
Cool. So actually, I should probably go ahead and introduce myself so you guys have a little bit better understanding. My name is Brian Lauchner. I have been a full-time wholesaler and investor since 2014. I bought my first property in 2008, but ultimately was working a corporate job, kind of doing that kind of thing. And then about 2014, I was working and went into work one day and they said, well, you don't really work here anymore. And so I was like, okay, great. That's frustrating, but okay, and I kind of just took that and said, I got to find something else, right? And so I got to go home. I got to have that conversation with my wife at the time. My situation basically was I was the only income earner in my family. So my wife stayed at home with my son. My wife was also pregnant at the time. And so long story short, I needed to go make something happen and kind of just said, look, let's entertain this wholesaling concept. Let's really kind of try to make it into a full-time business, and started buying houses, wholesaling houses, and it worked out pretty well, especially in 2014. The market was kind of prepared for that. So that kind of was the real beginning in the real estate business. And kind of from there, obviously, like a lot of you, if you've been wholesaling for any amount of time or investing in any amount of time, you start trying other strategies, right? So I got into fixing and flipping quite a bit, flipped a few houses, rental properties, land banking, was a lender for a little bit. I even owned a property management company for about 6 months before I realized it's just not my thing. And that's kind of how I got started, and that's kind of what it morphed into. And somewhere in there in about 2016, I was actually at a RIA meeting in my local area of Dallas, Texas. And there was this man, and this guy was talking about basically how to become a deal architect, right? And I'm like, what the heck does that even mean, right? And he was kind of showing me some different ways to do the thing. But, the reality is, if you've ever been to a RIA live, like you got friends there and sometimes there's food. And at this event specifically, there was an open bar. And so there was just kind of like, maybe I wasn't paying attention. But a lot of the stuff he was talking about sounded fascinating, but it didn't really apply to me. At least that's what I heard, right? Sometimes we hear something different than what's actually said. And so afterwards, I happened to be next to him over by the bar, and I just said, hey, cool presentation or whatever. He asked what I did. And I said, well, right now I'm wholesaling full time. It was 2016. And he basically said, look, if you're wholesaling, you really need to consider adding creative financing to your acquisitions model. It will radically change your business, and it will introduce you into the note business. And I was like, here's the thing, man. Like I've been doing this for like a year and a half now, so I'm clearly an expert. And I just don't think that's what I need. Because in 2016, if you were wholesaling, then you knew that the market was just kind of going crazy, right? Especially in my business, in our area, we had no problem getting buyers. Our buyers list was literally exploding. That was the year that it really just blew up. And then our marketing dollars were actually outperforming what we had anticipated. So we were getting more leads on the response rates were substantially higher on our marketing than we anticipated. So when someone told me I needed to change my business, I'm thinking, man, you don't know what you're talking about. Now, little did I know that man was Eddie Speed. That guy, just to sum it up in 2 sentences, is he's been in business for 40 years and he's done it for 40,000 deals. And so he is the real deal. He's not he's not a flash in the pan, kind of guy. And he started in this business in 1980 by wholesaling notes or flipping notes. And that's how he got into this. And that's kind of what he focused on. And so I kind of met this guy and, didn't really think anything of it in 2016. Moving forward in the story, basically in 2018, the market started to shift. Our response rates on our marketing really started dropping. I started realizing, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. What am I doing something wrong? Is it my marketing? Is it our acquisition strategy? Like, what is it that we're messing up or whatever? And ultimately it was just, look, the market's changing. You got to change with it. Right. And so I remembered this guy and I said, I'm going to call him. I'm going to call him up and I'm going to see if maybe he can help me. He seemed to have this insight, and now I know who he is. And so it's not, it was kind of that realization of like, he probably has some pretty good ideas, right? And so anyway, that's kind of the story about how I got involved with Eddie. And again, Eddie really, he started wholesaling notes and he grew even in the early 90s. He was good friends with Ken D'Angelo. If any of you are familiar with the home investors groups, or maybe you own a franchise, Eddie actually developed all of the seller financing curriculum for all of home investors back in the day. And we still have about 15 franchises come through Noteschool each year to kind of learn the rest of the business. And so I really kind of want to dig into that today. Because ultimately, I'm going to be talking about kind of what Noteschool teaches. And I think that as far as how Noteschool came about, it was really in the early 2000s. Eddie was, flipping notes to people, educating the home investors guy. All these different things were kind of coming to a head. And he's like, man, we just need some sort of ecosystem, some sort of place you can go to learn and grow in the creative finance, the note space. And so I want to talk a little bit about why it is that notes is the topic, right? So when Ryan and I were discussing about, what would be a really timely, important topic, like what would really be important for investors to be learning at this time, obviously we jumped right on the topic of like, there's not a better time and there's not a better person to kind of bring this content. Because from a standpoint of Eddie, just so you know, like if you look at these dates, you'll see that all of these events, these were all downturns in the economy, right? These are all really shifts in the market. And this is really when Eddie started, when there was 20% interest and people were really struggling in business. Mortgage originators were struggling, real estate agents were struggling. And he found a way to think a little bit differently and really start to thrive in the marketplace, right? And you'll see that as a constant theme throughout, including like in 2008 when he took really what non-performing notes are, right? The bad debt that was on all these houses. He bought it for really cheap. He taught people how to turn around and make some really big money at it. And so I show you all this to say that this guy has very, very tested strategies. And it obviously brings us to what has happened in 2020. But I say this too, to show you these dates to say that, look, there's really going to be like this brighter, rainbow kind of thing on the other side of the storm, right? That is 2020, or that is the coronavirus. So let's kind of dig into really what this looks like, because from a current market standpoint, there's a couple of things we got to address. First of all, there's lending restrictions since March, right? You can basically look at the lendability, who's borrowing, who's not able to borrow. Interest rates are obviously historically low, so it's getting harder and harder to incentivize people because, are you going to save an eighth of a point like for all the fees you pay? Is that really worth it? So we kind of take a look at some of the data from like Mortgage Bankers Association, for example, and they put out a newsletter every single month. The most recent one, we'll have another one coming out actually probably this Friday. So maybe even on the Saturday class, I'll have updated information. But on October 8th, there was the last one talking about the mortgage credit availability dropping. And really what that means when you look at this chart is there are 35% less qualified borrowers today than there were in January, right? Or in 2019. Now, why does that matter? Why should you care? What does that mean to you? Well, if you're a wholesaler, have you contacted your buyers since March? Are you seeing that you're losing a group of your buyers because they have some excuse, but really it boils down to they can't get funding anymore? Possibly. Same thing with rehabbers, same thing with landlords who are they're buying them, they're renting them out, and then they're refinancing them out, obviously after they're rehabbed and refinanced, or rehabbed and rented. They're trying to refinance. Well, if there's 35% less people who can refinance and qualify for a new loan, a lot of those people aren't doing that. And so this kind of image that I'm showing you, I'm going to kind of refer back to this because it really highlights well a few different opportunities in the marketplace that I want you to just be aware of and really kind of consider what does this look like in my, my subdivision or wherever it is you live, right? And then another piece of information, kind of pulling back the macroeconomics of this whole thing, is Freddie Mac did a presentation in June or July, I can't remember now, talking about kind of projections, right? And as you know, you get enough large organizations together, they're not going to agree. So you got National Association of Realtors, Mortgage Bankers Association, Home Builders, CoreLogic, et cetera. They don't agree on what exactly is going to happen, but the one thing they do agree on is that home values next year will be lower than they are this year across the United States. And as we all know, things are bought on the, you make your money on the buy, right? And so there's a huge opportunity coming up. And the reality is, it's not really what the market does, right? As investors, we don't care what the market does. We care what we're going to do in that market, right? What strategy are we going to deploy to really go and capitalize on that market? And so I kind of want to take you through this journey. And this is something that Eddie kind of pointed out to me back in 2018 that I thought is just a solid foundation for kind of moving forward. So just kind of imagine this. Go with me on this little bit of a metaphorical journey here. And just imagine you own a car dealership, right? So brand new car dealership, brand new cars on the lot. Everything's good. You're trying to sell cars, but you don't have the ability to sell them without, or you don't have the ability to sell them with any sort of financing. So every sale has to be cash. And my question is, do you think that's going to impact your sales? Right. And I think that we would all agree, like, yeah, of course, the auto financing industry is massive. And like most people buy cars with a loan, like all that makes sense. And all I'm trying to get us to agree on is the fact that that financing element, it's just a powerful variable. And if we can agree that it's just a powerful variable that's in the auto industry, that if we put it in the auto industry does better. We're going to transition and talk about, obviously, the same things with home building, right? You building homes, you're throwing up sticks and bricks, trying to sell houses, but you got to sell them for cash. Is that going to impact things? Of course it is, right? Homes are traditionally sold with mortgages. And so again, if we could just look at that as a powerful variable, what would that powerful variable, if we could add that to, for example, our real estate investing business, what would that look like to add an element of creative financing to our real estate business, all because it's a powerful variable that when inserted into certain businesses, it really helps you to scale and thrive, right? And probably one of the biggest conversations I have with investors when I'm talking about, hey, what's your bottleneck? What's stopping you from growing? What's stopping you from scaling XYZ, right? Almost always it boils down to some sort of money thing. Like, well, if I had more money, or if cash flow wasn't the hurdle or whatever it is. And so when you're looking at the creative financing element, what I want you to kind of get to is the fact that what if you could have a financial partner that would fund any aspect of your business, whether you're looking for somebody to grow your marketing budget, to fix, be able to borrow more money for fix and flips, rental properties, whatever it is, whatever your thing is. If you had somebody say, look, I'm going to fund all this stuff, you just got to go out and do it. Wouldn't you be able to scale and kind of go to that next level? And I think that pretty much every investor is going to be like, yeah, probably. I mean, we could figure out the logistics and the hurdles we have to overcome logistically and operationally, right? And that's really what I kind of want to talk about, because so many people get hung up on the financing piece, but really this creative financing element, to quote Eddie from 2016, like if you'll add the creative financing element to what you're doing, there is a substantially larger opportunity. So let me kind of walk you through this, because this is what it means to become a deal architect, right? And this is kind of what, if you are an active real estate, if you're talking to sellers at all, it doesn't even matter what your strategy is. If you're talking to sellers at all, this is going to be huge, right? So take a look at this. You got creative financing on the left side. I'm sorry, conventional loans on the left side, right? This giant chunk. And when things are good, when the market's good, what we really see is that the banks are typically going to fill the gap in the marketplace, right? And so we're going to have a situation to where the majority of mortgages are going to be given out by banks, right? And so the need for creative financing is really not that big of a need. And so it just kind of fills this small gap at the top. This is what we call easy money, right? This is like times like 2019, 2018, where, not 2007 necessarily where you fog a mirror, you get a loan thing, but kind of getting closer to it. In fact, in January, I saw an ad. I'm sorry, I heard an ad on the radio that was talking about no money down mortgages and that kind of stuff. And so it's like, that is all telling you we're in easy money time. But my point with this is that eventually the market shifts, right? We're in a cyclical market. We have a cyclical market, and when that shifts, the conventional money space starts to shrink. And this is what we call scarce money. And this is what we saw so perfectly in March, because banks started to change their lending requirements, making it harder and harder for us to get loans, and making it, only the best borrowers were going to be able to borrow money. And because of that, creative financing really fills the gap. And so the reason I tell you this is because when we're talking about creative financing filling the gap in the marketplace, not only am I going to show you that, you can obviously see that when you're competing for deals, you're typically wanting to go in the direction of path of least resistance, right? I want to go to where it's easier to get deals. And so if you're kind of playing on the creative financing side, times like right now, and especially next year, I mean, the opportunity is just booming, right? So let me kind of back this up, because I really want to kind of talk holistically for the next hour. What are we going to talk about? Here's what we're going to really be covering, right? These are three powerful, in my opinion, ingredients that are really going to help you discover that next step, right? So the first one, we're going to be talking about buying at full retail and making a fortune, right? And still making a fortune even though that we paid retail. And the important part with this is that in most markets right now, and I won't say right now, but there was a trend of people they want the high price, right? They think that the market's gonna just keep going like this forever and ever, right? And so the seller sentiment is, what they believe is that, well, my house must just be worth more and more. And so we're gonna find a way to say, fine, I'll give you full retail price and I'm still gonna make money, right? And a lot of people kind of find that to be crazy, especially if this is the first time you're hearing it. But the reality is, if you've ever wholesaled the deal, there was a time when you thought wholesaling was crazy. Like you thought to yourself, there's no way that could work. Who's gonna sell their house at 30% off, right? 40% off. No one's gonna do that. And then you did your first wholesale deal, and magically all of a sudden it's possible, right? It's so and then the second one I want to talk about is buying deals that no other wholesaler rehabber is even considering pricing. Actually, the perfect example is actually the first one, right? How many wholesalers do you know going out, buying at retail and wholesaling it for more than retail? Not really. So they're not even running those appointments. So how can we kind of go about targeting those people? And then we're going to really focus on buying or making big money today through creating our own notes and being in the note business, as well as the bonus income for the future. And I'll kind of get into this on a little bit, but what you got to understand is that this is something that everybody can do. If you're a real estate investor, if you're talking to sellers, if you're trying to get your business off the ground, it's something you can implement right away. This is not a really long, drawn out learning curve or anything like that, because it's just simply thinking a little bit differently. And if you've talked to sellers at all in the last, however long you've been in business, the majority of these leads, like the majority of them, are going to be in your trash can. Think of every deal that you were here on price, they were here on price, you weren't able to meet in the middle, or whatever, you weren't able to come to an agreement. And so it went in your follow-up file, right? Which your follow-up file for most of you, unfortunately, as I've proven this over and over again because of my own business too, is that you follow up for a certain period of time and then you keep them in the follow-up file, but they're really in your trash can. So maybe we should call it recycling bin, right? But the bottom line is, obviously, I'm going to show you how to do this. And really, the whole reason that I'm even really bringing this up is because in 2016, when Eddie told me about this, I did not need a new action in my business in order to get a new result. My results were fine. In fact, my results were better than what I thought I was going to do. So I was arrogant, to the point of like things were going really, really well. And I think all that the pandemic really did is it really reset a lot of investors' thinking to realize that if I need a new result, then I need that new action, right? Or if I want more, I need to add an action to my business in order to accomplish that new goal, right? And so let's kind of dig into what the niches in the note business are, so that really everybody has a better understanding. Because I think you're going to start to identify with several of these things as like, oh yeah, this is something I really want to talk about. The first one being kind of what I've talked about already, which is this creative financing element. And this is really creating our own notes. That's kind of why we start here. Because if I can show you from inception all the way through, then you're going to start to see how this really fits in your business really well, right? What does that look like to buy a house and have the seller finance that entire acquisition, right? We're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're also going to talk about this defaulted loan situation. And what does that mean to have bad debt, right? To buy basically a mortgage note that they're not paying on. Why would I want to buy that bad debt? Well, if you can buy an ugly, distressed house and rehab it to make it into something valuable and make good money, why couldn't we do that with the paper side of real estate? And I'll show you how massive amounts of wealth were transferred between 2008 and 2012, literally using this one strategy, just this one. This is the strategy Eddie, well, you'll hear him say it multiple times if you follow him on social media or anything. He talks about it's literally in these little swings of big movements on the defaulted loan space. He will double his net worth within a short window, all because of how cheap you can buy these assets. So we'll dig into that a little bit. And then there's flipping notes. This is how Eddie started. You're wholesaling notes, right? This is for anybody who's brand new to real estate, anybody who's wholesaling houses, anybody who's looking for active income. They want to make fee right now, right? And I especially tell people, if you are brand new, this is something you really want to consider, because especially if you're wholesaling houses, because you're going to find that wholesaling notes is simplistic, but there's some, it's a little bit more simplified than wholesaling a house. And so if you're struggling to get that first wholesale deal done, other than going to a boot camp with Ryan, you might want to consider something like, what would that look like to wholesale notes? Because that's how Eddie started, and you're going to start to see that typically half of the deal's done for you. So we'll kind of walk through that. Buying performing loans. This is for all the people who are like, Brian, look, stop making me work. Like, I want to invest my money. I want to get good return on investment, but I want substantially lower risk, right? And I will show you some, literally, when I say unbelievable, I mean literally unbelievable leveraging strategies with this that you've probably never seen before, that can drastically change the return on investments, but also kind of to Ryan's point and Anish's point earlier about doing it even in a tax-free way, right? So we'll talk a little bit about this. This is probably one of the best wealth building strategies that I've ever come across. The burnout landlord space is a niche in the note business because there was some research done that kind of shows between 2010 and 2020, there's been 18 million new landlords. 18 million new landlords entering the space. So if you feel like all of a sudden there's this competition over the last 5 to 10 years, you're not wrong. There's an additional 18 million people just kind of coming on board, right? And so with that being said, what does that mean? And what caused this surge of investors, right? And when you really look at the data holistically, you can almost pinpoint it to 4 letters, and it's HGTV, right? It's the people who saw Chip and Joanna Gaines or Property Brothers, or in Florida, you guys had Vanilla Ice for a little bit, right? So, I mean, like you have your favorite person that is flipping houses, and you're so inspired by it that you're like, maybe I should give this a try. And that happened all across the country, right? And so now you got people who are like, I'm going to get in this real estate game. And maybe some of you are in that spot, right? I kind of consider myself in that spot. I had more of a need than a desire, but the reality was a lot of people, they're like, let's give it a go. And what happened is they bought a house, and we'll even say they bought it from a wholesaler, and maybe they even got some education and some training. But the reality is their lack of experience with contractors and budgets and timelines made their $20,000 rehab budget $30,000 or $40,000, right? And what happened at that point was a lot of them, these newer investors said, well, hang on a second. If we're not going to make $80,000 like Chip and Joanna do, then, or whoever, right? Then maybe what we should do is we'll put a tenant in the house, and in 30 years, this will be the best decision we've ever made. And they're not wrong in 30 years. But if you've ever owned rental properties like I have, you know as well as I do, it's not about 30 years. It's about really that first 5 years. That's the pain in the butt, like part of owning a rental. The property hasn't appreciated enough to refinance and pull all my capital out. The rents haven't been raised enough to make the cash flow really a source of revenue to be able to pay for anything that was to happen. And I find myself in this spot to where you see a consistent theme of like, you fix the air conditioner instead of replacing the air conditioner because you were just going to flip it. You didn't care. Well, now that broke in 18 months. Well, now you're pouring more capital into a property that has the same rent rate. And what I'm saying with that is it's driving your returns down, right? And these are the headaches that people have. And really, when you talk to these landlords, especially, you've been a landlord for 10 years, you got a handful of properties maybe, it's always the same thing. There's the good pieces. Hey, I love the cash flow when the tenant pays. I love the fact that it's attached to real estate that's hard asset. I could drive by it on my way home from work every day. But I hate the tenants and the toilets and the turnover and the capital expenditures, putting more of my money into a property that I originally got into to pull money out of, right? And so as a note school student, we've really designed these strategies to go and target these people and say, look, you like the good, you hate the bad. What if I could show you a way to keep the cash flow, keep the return on investment, probably even a better one, keep the fact that it's attached to real estate, but I'm going to take away all the bad. I'll take away tenants, toilets, and turnovers. No more money goes back into this property. If I could show you a way to where you could keep all of the good and I could take away all the bad, would you be open to a conversation of working with me? Because I got a few ideas. And without getting too deep into it, I could buy all their rental properties from them, right? If I wanted to. But the bottom line is these group of people, this purple triangle is the group that will fund any aspect of your business. When I said at the beginning, what if you had a financial partner who could fund XYZ? Well, if it's not the seller, you're going to find this group is going to be perfect because playing the role of the bank is what you're giving them the opportunity to do. Now, if I'm going to buy all their rental properties, now I'm responsible for tenants and toilets and turnovers. How do I get away from that? I'm going to turn around and I'm going to find a specific type of buyer to buy this house for me. And I'm going to resell it to that type of individual so that I can also assume the role of the bank. And this is really what Eddie kind of showed the Home Investors Company, right? And they've been doing this for years. But this really gives you a better understanding of the niches in the note business. And really what I want you to take away from this, because I know I'm going fast, but it's just because I'm trying to get as much in here as I can in the short time that we have, is typically at this point, people are saying, okay, great, maybe he's going to talk about this, or I hope he talks about this. This is what I want to focus on. And you're thinking about it all wrong. Here's what I want you to do. Look at the screen. It does not matter which one of these colorful triangle pieces of the pie or whatever are important to you or interesting to you. What it matters is, are you money today or are you money tomorrow oriented? Do you need money today? Like my business, I have revenue goals. I mean, I got a business to support. I got a family that feeds. My kids, they still want to eat every single day. Can you believe it? Multiple times a day. Kids these days, no, I'm just playing. But I have money needs now. But I also don't want to be the guy who's like, yeah, I'll just wholesale for the next 40 years and then I'll figure out retirement later, right? And so I'm also focusing more on money tomorrow. And some of you are just focused on money tomorrow. You say, look, Brian, I got good income. I don't need more taxable income. You think I want to pay more taxes for fun? No, let's find ways to let's push all this wealth off. Let's really build my wealth or find a way to do it in a tax-free way. And that kind of thing, and really talk about money tomorrow, which could be 5 years, 10 years, right? You don't have to wait 30 years or 40 years, whatever. You don't have to wait till retirement to talk about money tomorrow. And so as we kind of take a look at this is really the perfect picture of what I think the note business is all about. And so I kind of want to dig into kind of some use cases and some strategy here to kind of get you farther along. And I'll start kind of with the foundational kind of slide or two about what a note is, because I've already said it about a dozen times. So to keep everybody on the same page, right? Let's not overcomplicate this. A note is simply a promise to pay. That's what I want you to walk away knowing is it's a promise to pay. Like think about a car note or a house note, right? A mortgage, right? You get an asset today and you have a promise to make payments on that in the future. And if you don't pay that, what happens? Well, they're going to come and take your car. They're going to come and take the house. It's just simply a promise to pay, right? And when we're talking about promises to pay, I mean, there's terms that are going to be involved in this, obviously, and we call notes all kinds of different things, right? And for the purposes of today, it doesn't really matter what I call it. Just understand it's just a promise to pay. If I said land contract, don't be like, I don't understand the contractual pieces of this. You don't have to. For right now, somebody owes somebody something, and let's start there, right? And so I want to walk you through a traditional transaction and show you how it's different from where we're going, right? Everybody understands that when somebody sells a house, there's going to be a seller, a buyer, a house, and a bank, and the seller is going to deed ownership over to our buyer, right? Buyer's going to buy the house. But how are they going to pay for that house? Well, traditionally, what we see is they're going to go get a mortgage note, and most of the time from a bank. And the bank is going to fund obviously fund the whole transaction, and they're going to put chains around the house, not literal chains, but they're going to put a lien on the house and use the house as collateral, right? That's how they're securing their money. And for the purposes of tonight, I want to really talk about more the side of things of if we got rid of the bank, right? What if instead the seller was to become the bank, right? And this is important because there's a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, this is huge because just think about how many appointments you have with a bank on a weekly basis. How many times are you going to the bank? Like you probably don't talk to bankers that often. You're probably not asking to borrow money on a weekly basis. How many times are you talking to sellers though? Well, I'm talking to sellers multiple times in a week. So if every time I talk to a seller, it's also an opportunity for funding, what do you think my ratio is going to be? Aren't my odds going to be better if I'm always asking for more, right? It's swinging the bat, right? I'm just going to keep swinging. Eventually, I'm going to connect. And now, why would the seller ever agree to play the role of the bank? Why would they want to do that, right? Well, typically it boils down to a couple of things. I'm going to give them something that no one else is willing to give them. I'm going to give them something that they really want, or I'm going to explain to them that this is in their best financial interest. And the majority of the time, that's typically the thing they're going to go for, right? And we'll kind of get into that. There's a lot of reasons, but the seller selling the house, the reason they're going to play the role of the bank is because they care about the same two things that you and I care about. And actually everybody, the one thing everybody actually agrees on when you're lending money is the same two things. What do you get? You get some sort of, the price or the interest or equity or whatever you structure in the deal, you get something. And then the other piece that they care about, that we care about, is what happens when the buyer gets hit by a bus? What happens when things go wrong? What happens, whatever, right? How am I protected? In this case, the collateral that's going to secure the transaction is collateral they're very familiar with. And so you're not saying, like a hard money lender, when they loan money, they're kind of like, they got to do all this due diligence to kind of figure out, oh, am I comfortable with this asset, right? In this case, this is somebody who's lived in the house for 10, 20, 30 years, or they've rented the house for 10, 20, 30 years. And if the worst thing that happens is, hey, I make payments and all of a sudden I somehow screw this up and blow it, well, you're back in the same spot. And chances are you've gotten more of my payments, as well as maybe the house is even appreciated, right? So it's not really that scary, right? It's not like I'm saying, look, you play the role of the bank, and then I'm going to give you my family farm's tractor. And I have a sister who's got a Beanie Baby collection from the 90s that's worth a fortune. That kind of collateral, even if it's worth the value, like that's a nightmare. Because really, they're just going to sit there and freak out about, oh my gosh, how much of my money is really protected here? How would I sell all this stuff? How long would it take to sell all this stuff? They're going through that. So the collateral piece is pretty huge. And so by doing this, this is really when we talk about using the seller to play the role of the bank, this is like deal architect 101. This is what it looks like to become a deal architect. So let me kind of walk you through some of the benefits quickly, because really what I want you to start to understand is that you're going to keep doing what you're doing, but by adding something to your business, this is what Eddie was saying so clearly. If you'll add this to your business, there's a huge opportunity, right? The first one is you're just going to see opportunity that other people don't see, right? And on Saturday, I'll kind of go into more of this. I'll kind of give you examples in my own business about deals that I got after Eddie versus the deal. Like I've walked on those deals so many times, right? And I never got those deals. Your eyes are going to be tuned into an opportunity that you didn't notice before. It's like when you go to a car dealership, you buy whatever, say a red car. You're driving off the lot down the highway in your red car, and then magically, because you bought a red car, that same red car is passing you on the other side of the highway, right? Now, is it because you bought a red car? No, it's because your eyes have tuned into the fact that something that relates to you or something that's important to you, right? Those red cars have been there the entire time. Well, it's no different. You're going to start to see deals because your eyes are tuned into things that are happening all around you, right? And you're going to have specialized knowledge of how to actually do that. You're going to be able to react when others are going in another direction, right? This herd mentality, whether we really want to believe it or not, is we've all kind of been funneled through a similar process. We're all kind of going after the distressed seller. We're buying our list from List Source or RealFlow or whoever. We're sending them marketing, and we justify it by saying, well, mine converts better because I have a pink postcard instead of a yellow postcard. We have similar seller scripts. We have similar offers. And I'm not saying any of that's bad. What I'm saying is, if you've ever talked to a seller and they're like, well, I talked to so-and-so and they've got, they're $7 higher than you, I think I'm going to go with them. You're like, oh my gosh, how do I separate myself? Like completely, like how do I make all those people go away because what I'm offering is so much different, right? How do I separate myself from the herd? And as a deal architect, you're going to see that's really kind of the approach, right? You don't have to do the same thing over and over. The creative element is the fun part, right? And then also just from a competition standpoint, when you look at all of the investors in the country, only 5% of real estate investors utilize some form of creative financing when they're transacting business. Only 5%. And when I hear that, what I hear is, do you want to play in a playground with 95% of the investors, or do you want to play on the playground with 5% of the investors, right? I would obviously prefer less competition if I can get it. It just makes me more money, right? And so what I want to do is I want to talk about this creative financing element first, because by starting with creative financing, we're going to acquire a property and be able to turn that into money, as well as potentially even create our own note if we want to. And so check this out. Take a look at all these assets. They're popping up on the screen. You see, you got Maryland and Wisconsin. What do these have in common? Like when you look at these pop up, what do they have in common? They're not all residential, right? What do they have in common? Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put up some multiple choice questions, and I'll even skip the test part. We'll just dig straight into it. But look at this real quick. You see all these assets. Nothing really stands out right away for what they all have in common. But let me kind of show you what it's about, right? So this is multiple choice, right? Like I said, and I'll kind of go through it quickly. But is it A, that they paid retail and that's what they have in common? Is it that somebody used creative financing to profit? Is it C, that they made more money doing it this way? They've doubled their profits versus a wholesale deal? Or is it D, all of the above? And kind of like I said, I'm going to skip forward here and kind of really highlight the all of the above part, because obviously these were deal architects who went out and bought these by paying retail. They used creative financing to be able to pay the retail and to profit. And they obviously made more money than a wholesale deal, because if they paid retail, again, I don't know wholesalers paying retail and then turning around and selling it for over retail. That's not, it's, if somebody figures that out, let me know, right? And so long story short, again, it's really just about highlighting how many deals have you walked away from? Have you walked away from somebody who wanted retail? Of course, right? And so let's kind of talk about that. But before we can get into it, we got to talk about this guy, the elephant in the room, right? And really at this point in the market cycle, our two biggest kind of elephants in the room, so to speak, are competition and loss leads. Competition, pretty much, we understand this piece. It's just that crowded marketplace doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. And that's why it's kind of the elephant in the room, is nobody really talks about it. Everybody just kind of knows it's there. And we'll talk a little bit about this. But the second one I think is actually worth mentioning tonight and kind of going into. So Eddie Speed is training almost 300 now, 200 something. I don't know how many people it is, but almost 300 people that we call the ninjas, right? These are the top 300 out of 500 real estate investors in the country. People who consistently do 100, 150, 200 deals a year. That's why we call them the ninjas. But he does masterminds with a lot of these guys. He goes to and speaks at other masterminds where a lot of these high-level investors are at. And one of the things that's unique about the ninja is the ninjas have data. They use these key performance indicators to really drive the metrics of their business and help them make business decisions. And the bottom line with what I said there is they have data, right? They know what they spend, why they spend it, where it goes, everything. And one of the things that Eddie does right out of the gate, anytime he's putting together a case study with these guys, is he says, look, put together all your data and let's start to figure out where the bottleneck is. Why are you here? Why am I here? What do you need help with? How can I help, right? And one of the things that was interesting is this is a metric that you would think wouldn't need to be talked about. But one of the things that happened is they compiled all this data and they started talking about bottlenecks in marketing. And they said this. They said that basically out of 20 offers that I make, I'm going to get one cash offer accepted. Now that was an average of all of those guys. And for you, you might be doing better. You might be getting 1 out of 50. Who knows? The bottom line is you can relate this to you in your own numbers. Obviously, you know your numbers. But if they're getting 1 deal out of 20, the questions were about marketing. Well, if I double down on marketing, when do I see diminishing returns and all this? And Eddie says, you're thinking about it the wrong way. You asked me a question and you framed it from this standpoint. You said you get 1 deal out of 20 offers, right? So if you want to do 5 deals, you've got to make 100 offers. But Eddie says you're missing it. What you should be saying is I'm missing 19 out of 20 offers. This is the piece of the pie you're not paying attention to. Why aren't you getting those? Now, you're not going to get all of them, but is there a way to monetize some of those? Of course. And so where are those leads, right? Well, you're going to find that they are in our trash can or our follow-up file, right? A lot of times. And these guys are seasoned. These are legit investors. So I'm not saying in any means that they don't follow up. But at a certain point, you've called and you've called and you've called and you're just still saying the same thing over and over again. You're not going to come to terms, right? And so Eddie basically said, look, what if I could show you a way to add creative financing to your acquisitions model to start to monetize some of these leads? So basically what he did is he said, look, over the next 6 months, right, I'm going to teach you creative financing while we're here. over the next 6 months, you're going to start acquiring houses on terms. In 6 months, we're going to come back and we're going to close this case study and we're going to see really what the results were. Did you get more deals done because of it, right? And so in 6 months, they came back, and as projected by Eddie, when you look at the averages, they were getting a second deal done on the same marketing dollars. So instead of doubling down on marketing and getting a second deal, they simply revived one of these from their trash can, right? Or they monetized a lead that they weren't typically going to get it because they bought it on terms. And it was an average, it was 2 point something. So some of these people are actually getting a third deal done, all on the exact same marketing spend. So they weren't spending any more money, and they're getting literally twice as many deals done, sometimes 3 times as many deals done, all because of something they added to their business, right? It's kind of like adding a tool that can really change things, right? If all you have is a hammer, if you'll just add a wrench, you can start to solve a lot more problems, right? That kind of concept. And so, this is basically what Eddie was talking about with the ninjas. And the reason I tell you about this case study is because I think it really hits home for every investor, right? It doesn't matter if you're doing hundreds of deals, you're going to make so mmany offers and you're going to start getting deals out of it. And so if you could add 1 or 2 things to that conversation to pick up some other deals, what are you going to do? Like, how would that be beneficial, right? You could still go make the cash offer, but they made cash offers 19 times and were told no. So why would you keep doing it over and over again? Why not just position something else, right? And so that's where I really want to talk about Seth and Brianna, because Seth is a Noteschool student. He wasn't, right? And so he's a Noteschool student. He's a good guy. And what I want to walk you through is basically this question right here. Can you make $196,000 in profit on a house that has next to no equity, right? So there's not margin in there, and do it with none of your own money, right? Now, this is kind of an extreme example, but I'm going to choose the extreme example because, again, it hammers the point home. And then, again, on Saturday, it allows me to unpack more deals and more case studies that will kind of show you how to do this, right? And so let me kind of walk you through this, because 95%, if not 100% of you, if this seller was to call you on marketing, and you pick up the phone and you're asking questions, as soon as you find out that, look, I owe retail and, all this other stuff, well, you probably wouldn't even run that appointment. You'd try to find a way to outsource the lead or to a real estate agent or something, right? This asset right here, Modesto, is the lady basically was an Army recruiter, right? So she's in the military. She lives in California. She bought this with a 0 down VA loan, right? 0 down VA loan. She's lived there for 10 months. So obviously no money down. You've only lived there for 10 months. It's not like you paid down the mortgage. She owes, I think it's 323, and had like a 4% rate. The bottom line was she was transferred 10 months into owning this house. She was transferred to Philadelphia, from California to Philadelphia. Now, doesn't sound like that big of a deal, except for the fact that she can't get rid of the house, right? She could have rented it, but she was not about to do that, because the move to Philadelphia actually was a promotion. She was going to get a pay raise and she was going to get a security clearance. And so she was just very excited to go focus on this new chapter of her life, and she felt stuck. She actually talked to a couple of wholesalers who came out and gave her really low prices. And one of them actually suggested that she do a deed in lieu of foreclosure, which, come on, like, we're better as an investor group. That's not necessarily what we should be suggesting to people, right? When there's other opportunity, other options. And so the other problem with doing a deed in lieu of foreclosure is this is from her, I don't know much about this, but she had said that it would risk her security clearance and potentially lose her future entitlements to other VA loans, right? So that was a little bit of a headache and a little bit of an issue. So when Seth stepped in, Seth basically was like, look, you don't have to do a deed in lieu of foreclosure, right? I can buy your house. I can buy it for whatever you owe on it, and I'll just pretty much take over at this point, right? Wholesalers were around 250. She's obviously not going to write a $70,000 check. The retail range, this is always an interesting conversation, because if you went and pulled comps, or you had 10 people pull comps on this property, they would be anywhere from 325,000 up to 345,000. I mean, it would be a pretty wide gap. And so Seth basically steps up and says, look, I'm gonna make this thing happen. I'm gonna give you the price that you need. You're going to sell or finance this property, right? You're gonna sell me the house, and you're gonna let the financing that's in place stay in place and fund this entire transaction. Seth's gonna make $20,000 for doing it. as well as cash flow for the future. So this is a perfect example of making money today and getting bonus income in the future, right? If you wholesaled this house somehow, you would make a fee one time, right? This is a way to make that fee plus additional income. So how does this work? Well, your seller is going to deed ownership over to the deal architect, right? Seth in this case. Sorry, Seth's wearing a skirt today. And then the note that's going to be created is actually going to be a note with the seller, right? The seller, there's going to be a promise to pay the seller. And in this case, whoever the seller is responsible for paying, we're also assuming that. And all payments will flow that way. Now, the payment flow, we'll get into it more on Saturday, but it's all going to be done by a licensed and compliant note servicer who will handle the transaction, right? So Seth's at a spot to where he's got a deal, but he hasn't made any money yet. So now we got to find a way to make Seth money, right? So he's going to purchase this thing at 97% of retail. Again, most of us are not doing this, right? He's doing no money down, which who doesn't like no money down investing, right? Because she doesn't need money down. When you look at real estate problems, there's financial problems and there's housing problems. This is a great example of somebody who was in a housing problem. They didn't need money. They needed to get rid of the house, right? And a lot of us don't target this this group of people in our country. We're really targeting the financial people because that pressure seems greater. And we're obviously gonna, Seth's gonna buy it subject to the existing mortgage, right? Now, somebody's probably going to be like, oh, Brian, you can't do subject to, or how do you get away with the due on sale clause and all this other stuff? Again, this is why I have Saturday put together, is so that I can actually walk you through these things and show you that Eddie's done over 15,000 of these specific type of deals, as well as in all 50 states. And so let's kind of dig into it, but understand that even at 97%, even buying subject to, even no money down, all that's great, of course. But none of that would have ever happened unless Seth got the seller to say yes, right? And that's kind of one of the quick start guides that Eddie, if you've ever read this is that logical, rational conversation of how do I explain to the seller this is going to be in their best interest? How can I say I can give you whatever you want as long as we can do it this way, right? And so now Seth's going to turn this into money, right? And he's going to sell it to someone called a penalty box buyer. Just understand it's a unique type of buyer we're going to talk about on Saturday. That, I mean, this is somebody who's a good borrower, but they just barely missed the qualified mortgage borrower box at Bank of America, right? There's something off. In fact, the perfect example in today's marketplace, literally 2020 right now, is somebody with a 650 credit score, which 650 is like known as being lendable, right? For years, if you had a 620 or a 640, you could get a loan. In fact, in March, Chase Bank said on it was like on Monday, you needed a 620 credit score. On Wednesday, you needed like a 670, I think it was. And then by the end of the week, it was 700. They changed their lending criteria and weeded out all those people between 620 and 699, right? Well, these people were qualified then. Just because of their credit score not qualifying now, that doesn't mean they're not qualified in our minds, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that more. Anyway, the bottom line is there are millions of these people. This is a $1 trillion marketplace of buyers. And it's the perfect person for us to target for a couple of reasons. But Seth's going to go ahead and deed ownership over to our penalty box buyer. And now there's going to be a wraparound note that's going to wrap around everything that's going to be owed to Seth. So the penalty box buyer has a promise to pay to Seth. Seth has a promise to pay to our seller, and our seller had a promise to pay, to whoever, the VA, right? And again, the payments will just be made, and they'll all be made through a licensed and compliant note servicer who will handle this transaction, keep everything compliant, and all that kind of stuff. Again, you get at least the concept, right? So on the acquisition side of things, nothing too fancy. He's just taking over the loan. It's a 4% rate, $1,565 a month. There's 10 payments on a 30-year loan made, so 350 months left, right? Now, when you resell something to a penalty box buyer, here's what you got to understand. Down payment does not need to be 20%, right? We typically shoot for 10%, but there's way more variables about what's more important. Interest rate on a loan with a penalty box buyer is anywhere between 6 and 10%. If you've got 100 loans, 90 of them would be between 6 and 10% interest, which again, to some of you are like, who's going to pay that interest? Well, these people have no other lending options, so they will, right? I'm telling you, it's a massive, massive marketplace. And again, they've got to afford this payment. So you can't just go throw out some crazy high interest. There's a method to the madness, so to speak. And so basically what he did is he structured this thing in a way to where he's going to go and charge this new buyer a down payment, right? They're going to put skin in the game because Seth had no money down. Seth gets to keep all of that down payment, which in this case was 20 grand. That's not even 10%, right? That's a pretty small down payment. But the borrower is more qualified in other ways. And so the down payment wasn't near as important, right? Plus, it allows Seth to have a $325,000 note that's owed to him at 6.5% interest, which is going to give you a higher payment for 30 full years. So those last 10 payments, Seth actually just gets to keep. And everything will go inside of what's called the land contract. And again, we'll kind of get into this. It's not a land trust. I just realized last week that a lot of people are getting hung up on the fact that a land trust and a land contract, those are two different things, right? And so from a cash flow standpoint, Seth is able to obviously get the difference in the payments, and that's where he's creating his cash flow, right? So he's making $20,000 down plus, almost $6,000 in cash flow his first year. He's making $25,000 on a deal that he couldn't even wholesale. And then he gets to keep the cash flow coming on for up to 30 years, right? And those last 10 payments, he'll just get to keep. And this is a $196,000 deal. This is a 6-figure deal, all on a deal that most of you would not have returned the phone call, run the appointment, gone and talked to the seller. You would have just walked away from it, right? There's so many of these in your trash can. You know somebody to where you were this far apart on price, this far apart on price, this far apart on price, right? You were far apart on price. This is the perfect case study to show you that price is irrelevant. It's not about the price that I pay. It doesn't matter what price I pay. It's about when I pay that price. And by having them take their equity over time, I can turn this into a great opportunity for everybody, right? So most of you can figure it out, but like if this is the only thing you focused on, if you just went crazy and did 10 of these, I mean, that's bananas. That's a $2 million deal. That's what, $200,000 in income and then, $58,000 a year, even if it took you 5 years to do 10 deals, right? And that's not even the point. Like I'll share with you just total transparency. I'll just share with you my personal experience, because when Eddie told me to do this in 2016, I was growing as fast as I could, right? Being a year and a half in business, I was just trying to scale, right? I tried to, every deal I did, I tried to put more and more into marketing. Well, Eddie told me to do this in 2016 and I didn't do it. And so I obviously had to go back and be like, yeah, well, how much is this really impacting me? Like, is it that important, right? And in full transparency, if you take away any of the flips or the rentals or anything that's not a wholesale deal, take all that out of 2016 for me. I did 17 deals in 2016 that were just wholesale deals, right? And in Eddie's own case study, he'll show you that, look, if you'll add acquisitions, if you'll add creative financing to your acquisitions, you could double the number of deals. So what Eddie was telling me in 2016 is you could have done another 17 deals. Now, let's just look at this conservatively for a second, because let's say I suck at what I do and maybe I don't get it. I'm not the sharpest crayon in the box kind of thing, right? Let's say I don't do 17 deals. Let's say I do half or less than half to keep the math easy, right? Let's say I only did 8 deals because I added creative financing when Eddie told me to do it. Y'all, that's $1.5 million in net worth. It doesn't exist because I didn't do this, right? From a cash flow perspective, $46,000 a year, completely missing, all because I didn't act. And the craziest part is, this is what was hard for me, is that was just 2016. What sucks is to look at it and know that I also had 2017 and 2018 before I finally started plugging this stuff in. $4.7 million in net worth sounds like a stupidly large number. Like, it's hard for me to relate to that. But when I broke it down and started realizing, oh crap, it's $140,000 in passive income a year that I'm missing. I've got to get serious about this, right? And the only reason I'm missing this is because I judged this before I tried it, right? Now, you're probably not like me. You're not thinking like, oh, I'm amazing at what I do because you've had some recent success, right? Like, I was just too new. I was too green to know how stupid I was, right? But again, with a market shift, I'm telling you, most of you have missed deals. And I'm asking you to at least entertain this idea before you shut it out, right? You've passed on deals. You know people who want retail, whatever it is. Maybe you're thinking, look, I can't get them to say yes to seller financing, or I couldn't get this seller to let me take over the mortgage or to give me 0% interest or whatever it is. On Saturday, we'll kind of go through all that. Don't panic, right? I'll show you that you can, and I'll get you confident doing it. And I'll kind of show you this, because this is really what Eddie kind of broke down for me in 2018, because he's like, I'm gonna make it basic for you. Wholesaling is like a partial squeeze on a lemon when you're trying to make lemonade. That's the most Eddie thing you'll ever hear, right? He's got all these funny sayings because he's from Mississippi. It's not that it doesn't work. Wholesaling works. You're going to make money doing it. But there's a way. Even if you're making 10 grand, 20 grand, 25 grand, obviously we're happy with that. But if there was a way, if there was a tool, if there was something else I could add to the equation to get all of the juice out of the lemon and get bonus income for the future, why wouldn't I want to do that? And so that's really what this whole creative financing element is about, is by adding something in, you'll be able to keep doing what you're doing and probably do a substantial amount more because of adding that in, right? There's really two ways to approach a wholesale deal, right? There's the cash way. We're all familiar with this. That's your partial squeeze. And then the reality is that there's three reasons that doesn't work, right? And the number one is that they won't accept the price. They can't accept the price because they owe too much, whatever. Or, you don't have a buyer for it, right? Maybe it's an obscure property or something. And so if the wholesale price doesn't work, right? Made my offer, they say no. Well, 19 out of 20 are on average are going to say no. Okay, fine. Then can I go around and make an offer on terms, give you your equity in future installments over time, and get financing terms that a bank would never agree to? I think that's kind of the key to this whole thing. And so I'm kind of running out of time, and I want to transition a little bit, but this not only allows you to do more deals, but then if I take this situation really once I've acquired it and then I turn around and resell it to a penalty box buyer, I have created my own note. And then once I've created my own note, there is another level, like a whole nother world of opportunities in this niche space that we're going to talk about. And really, just to kind of get everybody on the same page, I told you that you could basically flip a note, right? And when we're talking about flipping a note, we're really talking about wholesaling a note, right? This guy Justin, he's a Noteschool student. He was wholesaling houses and flipping houses in in Indianapolis, when he kind of got to the point to where, like, each deal he did wasn't making enough money. Like, each deal is the same amount of work, but it's not like he was making whatever, say 15,000, or if that's what he wanted to make, he was making 7,000. So it's like he was having to work harder and harder and couldn't quite push through it. The bottom line was he was running out of like deals, right? The volume wasn't there. So when he got introduced to Noteschool, buying notes is market agnostic. It's a virtual business. You literally go wherever the note is, right? It's not like I'm ever going to go see that property or anything like that. And so because of that, it allowed him to just go to where all the deals were and kind of open things up for him. And so there's four simple things we're going to dig into on Saturday, as you can see here. But obviously the key is you got to find somebody who's going to sell you a note, right? And I'll tell you how to market, where to buy your list, all this kind of stuff on Saturday. But we're going to start with the value. We're going to talk to them about, hey, tell me a little bit about the buyer, and tell me about when you sold it, and tell me about, how much did they put down? You're going to gather all the information you need to be able to make a decision. And you're ultimately looking for what's left, right? The $61,663. The unpaid balance is what you're buying the right to receive. When you buy a note, you're buying the remaining debt, right? And so when you look at this, it's 156 payments of 566. This is why I say this is easier than wholesaling a house, because when you're wholesaling notes, what we're going to do is typically you're going to take this deal, you're going to gather all the info, and instead of putting it under contract and then shopping it, you're going to take this information and you're going to take it to multiple buyers, right? And on Saturday, I'll walk you through who those buyers are, and you're going to get a price for them up front, right? They're going to commit to a price before you go negotiate the deal. And that's huge, because that really allows you to understand, okay, as long as I get it under this price, I know I can make money, right? And in this case, a funding source offered 50 grand. And why would the seller accept 50 grand if they're owed 61? Well, the same reason that a seller of a house would sell it to you at wholesale. It's about money today. You can have all your money if you'll just wait, or if you need your money now, then time value of money. Like I'm going to have to give you less money, right? And so Justin went out. He knew 50 grand was the magic number. Went out and got it negotiated down to $44,000. And again, kind of what makes this a little bit unique is the fact that from a closing standpoint, the funding source, your buyer, is actually going to do all the contract work, which is huge when you're brand new. A lot of people are like, I'm brand new, I don't know what to do. What if I screw up the contract? Okay, let somebody else do it. Right. And it's not like you're giving them, you're not paying them to do any of this stuff. They give you a price with all that built into it. Great. I'll negotiate a lower price and I get to keep everything in between. And that's really the whole story of flipping a note, right? And on Saturday, I'm going to show you there's really two ways to do it. You can go from the mom and pop investor, the person who has the note, and you can bring it to the big buyers. Or I'll show you what I do, and I'll even show you some of the tools that I use to do it, where as a Noteschool student, I have access to note inventory that I can readily purchase, and I just focus on raising money and moving the notes, because when inventory isn't a problem, things can go a lot faster, right? And when a buyer is ready, I can act on it, the whole thing. So but yeah, flipping notes is just something that, like, again, if you're new, if you're looking for active income, if you're looking for money on a monthly basis, it's just something to really get engaged with. And the cool part about Justin too is he's a single dad of two, and his kids are, I mean, he's got his kids heavily involved in karate. So obviously I call him Karate Dad. But the bottom line is he's really made this happen, and he gives a lot of credit to the Noteschool and to the note business, obviously. But he's done really well with it, right? And that's if you just want to flip a note, right? You just want a quick fee, right? And then there's all the people who are like, well, I want to do the note business, but I don't want to, like, I want to be more passive, right? And that's somebody like Joe. Joe's a Noteschool student. He's 50 years old. Well, he's early 50s. He's got a big corporate job in the chemical industry, really great income. He's not looking for money now. He's literally looking to invest his money and build wealth in the future, right? And so he'll go buy a note, whether he buys it from his own marketing or he's a Noteschool student. He has access to some of Eddie's companies, and he can buy notes from Eddie's company. And he'll go take a look at that note, and he'll buy that note. And when you're looking at a note, you look at the value first. The value tells you the debt that's on it and the equity. The debt is what you're buying. And then there's the equity, which is like, you know, how many payments have been made, how much is it appreciated, that kind of stuff. It kind of tells you your risk level. And again, on Saturday, we'll dig into this a little bit more. But what you got to understand is he was buying this note that had a 65% loan to value. So when you think from a risk standpoint, banks are loaning at 80% loan to value. Hard money lenders lend at 75% loan to value. So anything under 80, 70, you're getting lower and lower risk, right? And that's one of the reasons that people turn to notes also, is because you can get the same returns but substantially lower risk. Now, in Joe's case, he did this one in his IRA, right? And he's going to buy the right to receive all of those 203 payments. That's what he's buying, okay? So he's going to go out and he's going to buy this note, and every single month, the note servicer collects all the payments and sends him his payment of $319 every month, right? Until he's received all 203 payments and he's collected 64 grand. Now, his return on investment, though, that's determined by what he actually paid for it. And notes are always bought at a discount. And Joe, in Joe's case, especially since he's buying it from one of Eddie's companies, he bought it at a much bigger discount. So he bought it at $24,000, which gave him a 50% investment to value, his money into the value, so lower risk. And then it gave him a 14% return on investment. Now, what you got to understand about this is, I think that, again, if we were all in a room and we were shooting straight, I think we could look at this and be like, look, if you could consistently get 14% return on investment, not like one time or a couple times in a year, but like year over year, decade over decade, consistent 14%, is that a return on investment you'd be good with? And I think on average, you'd see most people are going to be like, yeah, that's good, right? But Joe actually turned this deal down. He did not stick with just 14%. Joe basically said, that's not good enough. I want to take it a step farther. And that's when and I get to be the one to introduce this to you, but you're going to hear this a lot at Noteschool. And this is something that really Eddie learned back in the day from his father-in-law. He said, if you want to make a lot of money in the note business, you have to learn to buy long, means buy the whole note, and sell short, which is sell just the front section of the loan. So you're going to buy all 203 payments, Joe, and then you're going to go sell the front section of the loan to somebody else, right? In this case, Joe's got coworkers, Joe's got friends, right? He's going to buy all 200, three payments, and he's going to go to somebody who wants a lower risk and say, look, do you want to get involved in a note that I bought, right? You would get all the payments, and we kind of go from there. And the way this works, and I'll kind of explain it to you a little bit better because that wasn't a good explanation, but the first thing he did is he went and said, yeah, I'm buying notes. It's a way to get good returns with lower risk. And this guy says, oh, I want to do that too. How do you get involved with that? And Joe says, I can just bring you into one of my deals. What would you be interested in making? And in this case, he's going to get, this is actually like a close friend of his. He's going to give him 10%. So Joe says, I'm going to give you 10% return on investment. You're going to get the first 120 payments, right, of the loan. And by buying this and getting the first 120 payments, I get none of the cash flow. I get none of the monthly payments until you've received all of your 120 payments. And I start getting payments after you're done, and I get all the back payments, right? So why would Joe do that, right? I'm going to tell you. But another way Joe pitches this is the reason that somebody would want to do this is he's saying, look, if something was to go wrong, I don't get my money until you're fully paid off. All my money is made at the end. So if something was to ever go wrong, Joe's going to step in and solve the problem to get it back on track so that Joe's money is secured, right? So you added this up in a financial calculator, and it's going to tell you that it's $24,063. Okay. So his investor's like, cool, let's do it. Here's 24 grand. I want to make 10%. That's killer. You're going to protect the deal in these ways. Great. And so this passive partial investor is going to get this payment every single month. Every time the payment is made, it's going to go to the passive investor, not to Joe, at least for the first 120 months, where the first 120 months goes by, his buddy gets completely paid off and he's done. And Joe's like, did you like that? Let's do it again. Let's go put that money into something else. Now, instead of 24 grand, now you have $38,000, right? So let's go do it again. So again, why would Joe do this? Everybody listen to this. This partial strategy. It was one of the most revolutionary things I'd ever seen in my life. Joe did this because if he gives up the first 120 months, he gets the back 83 months, right? The passive partial investor gets taken care of on the front end for $24,000. But Joe bought the entire note for $24,425, which means Joe only has $362 left of his own money in this deal. He recapitalized after buying the note. He recapitalized himself, left $362 in the deal, and gets those 83 months, which is another $26,000. So why would Joe give up 10 years of cash flow in his IRA? Because one, he can't touch the money anyway, but what kind of return on investment is it when you put up $362 and you make 26 grand? You don't need a calculator. At Noteschool, we just say, if you don't need a calculator, that return on investment's enough, right? And that's what you got to understand. Joe made all of this money. He puts $362 from his IRA in and gets $26,000 out, absolutely tax-free. Like this, the power of this partial concept is just unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And again, on Saturday, I'll walk you through this more because we just don't have time. But like this is something I really wanted you to understand. Once you create a note, yeah, you could flip it to somebody, you could sell it to somebody, but you could also just sell a chunk of it and recoup some of your capital, right? Giving you capital back today to go redeploy it, right? And buy another note and sell a partial, buy another. But also now you're building up this big nest egg in a partial, on the back end as well. And it's just incredible. So again, I'm running out of time, but I just want to walk you through this last thing, which is going to be the buying defaulted debts, right? On Saturday, this is one of my favorite things to teach because when you look at really an asset, right? Look at a house. It's troubled, it's distressed, it's ugly, whatever. And we're going to rehab it. We're going to add value to it. We're going to fix it, making it worth more valuable. And we get to keep all the equity in that deal for doing that work. And if you can do that with houses, why couldn't you do that with notes? If I could take a troubled note, right, and I could rehab that note, add value to it, make it worth a substantial amount more, then I would get to keep everything else. This is fixing and flipping for the note business. And here's why every single one of you needs to entertain this. Because I don't know what your strategy is, but look at the screen. Currently, you're buying houses at a certain discount, right? If it was 30% off, right? I still got a lot of buyers in the Dallas area who pay 85 cents on the dollar minus repairs. Like that is such a premium in my opinion. Like that's so expensive, but they'll buy them. And so it makes it easier to wholesale houses sometimes. But if it was a $100,000 house and I bought it at 70,000, That's $30,000 for my fee, their profit, rehabs, closing cost, everything. 30 grand max. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just math. Your profit can maximum only be this much because a lot of people got to get in there. The same thing happens in the note business, but with non-performing notes, you're buying them at pennies on the dollar, a substantial amount cheaper. And so if you want to wholesale houses, if you want to fix and flip houses, if you want to own rental property, if you want to sell or finance houses and create notes and then sell a partial, right, et cetera, why not get in them at 35 cents on the dollar, 55 cents on the dollar, substantially cheaper? Why would you not want to do that, right? This is going to be the lowest barrier to entry no matter what your strategy is. And on Saturday, I'll really walk you through this because this applies to anybody acquiring real estate. And whether you want to stay in the note business or you want to get into the housing business from the note business, this entry through non-performing notes, it's just like, this is why people like Eddie Speed say he can double his net worth in these dips. Because when you're buying them at substantially cheaper prices than before, it's crazy. The last thing is this, everything is going to be done by a third-party licensed and compliant note servicer. This person will collect all the payments, the taxes, the insurance. They'll make sure underlying mortgages are paid if it's bought subject to, et cetera, and they're the one that actually pays you out. Once they receive all the money, they'll get you paid. This is how you outsource a lot of stuff. And again, we'll talk about that on Saturday. So I went so fast. Hopefully you went and you got some nuggets out of there. And my big takeaway is I want you to understand that there's an opportunity in notes, whether you're acquiring from sellers, creating your own, just buying notes because you have access to inventory. Everybody on this call especially is really going to be jumping into this Saturday class, right? I always say, look, the next step is about creating notes or buying notes and being the bank. But again, the reality is for Bria and for Ryan, we're really trying to do our absolute best to give you guys some solid education. And so we've got this class coming up called Golden Notes on Saturdays from 9 to 4. It's insanely inexpensive. It is so cheap. How much they're charging for this class. Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's like $19 if you're a member. Like 19 bucks.
Yeah, $19 for members and only $39 for non-members.
Dude, that's bananas. That's bananas. That's such a huge perk for your group. And just so everybody's clear what we're going to cover, let me kind of just show one last slide. This day is built around going through these strategies through case studies. These case studies give me the opportunity to show you acquisitions, like the transition, like how did I turn it into dollars and actually dispose of the property? Like, what does this look like? It will show you the opportunity and it shows you how you're going to fit this into your business. And that's going to be so big. I'm also going to show you obviously how to do a tax-free flipping notes, how to buy performing notes, how to sell partials, non-performing notes, especially non-performing notes. I really get into the banking side of things about like how you can like map out when the banks are going to have things at 30 cents on the dollar again, right? I'm going to walk you through that accounting process, how banks do that. I'm going to teach you how to be a deal architect. And just for showing up, I've got 2 ebooks that Eddie has written that I'm going to give you. Like they're free just for showing up. They're part of doing. You paid $19 or $39. If you get nothing else but these books, it's going to be worth it. But I promise you, Saturday is going to be fun. If you show up, here's 3 promises, and I'll go through them again on Saturday just to make sure I fulfilled. But I'm going to show you deals. I'm going to show you how to do deals that other investors are passing on. We're going to talk about money today and money tomorrow, and I'm going to show you how this is truly a virtual business, truly virtual. And if you're somebody who you're an active real estate investor who's you're grinding right now, you're a wholesaler, you got your head down, you're not thinking about retirement money. Listen, I need everybody thinking about retirement money because here's something that I can show you that's revolutionary. I'm going to show you how to turn $100 into $100,000 absolutely tax-free in an IRA. So if you're brand new or if you're trying to you're just trying to pay the bills, you can take $100 and start building your wealth, even if that's the only place you go. Like I'll show you some really incredible stuff. Noteschool is really known as the Harvard of the note business. We just know exactly, if you're coachable and you'll go out and you'll take action after I teach you, dude, like we can basically tell you where you're going to be in a year, in 5 years, and 10 years. And so, Ryan, I tried to cover as much as I possibly could, man. So hopefully you guys got some stuff out of it. If